Hi, welcome back to Bio24, where we're going to talk about the immune system. The immune system is a defense mechanism that your body has to protect itself against pathogens. Pathogens, remember, are microbes that cause disease. There are two different types of defense mechanisms your body has. There's innate defenses, which means that these defenses are things that you are born with from birth and do not change over your lifetime. And then there's acquired immune systems, which means that your body learns over the course of its lifetime to recognize specific diseases. Innate defense mechanisms exist in all organisms, but generally speaking, immune systems, acquired immune systems, are found only in vertebrates or organisms with spinal cords. In the immune system and host defenses for the human body, there are three recognized layers of defense: primary defense, secondary defense, and tertiary defense. The first line of defense is what's considered to be the physical barriers that prevent entry of microbes. These are innate, so you're born with them, and they're nonspecific, so they defend the body against diseases universally. Examples of the first line of defense or the primary defense would be physical barriers such as your skin and mucous membranes. The second line of defense or secondary defense is system-wide, and it includes white blood cells and molecules that target all pathogens equally all over the body. This is also innate, or you're born with it, and includes things like enzymes found in tears and saliva and some white blood cells. One of the most potent enzymes found in tears and saliva is lysozyme. Lysozyme is an enzyme that destroys bacterial cell walls. It destroys the cell walls of all bacteria, not distinguishing between different types. Phagocytes are a type of white blood cell that acts in the second line of defense. These white blood cells engulf or eat bacteria, viruses, and other cells in a non-specific, innate way. And they do this system-wide. The inflammatory response, like what you get when you get a paper cut or an injury, redness and swelling at the point of injury, is also considered part of the second line of defense. Finally, we have the tertiary line of defense, or the third line of defense. This includes the white blood cells known as the B cells and T cells. These cell types are found around the body and work system-wide by specifically recognizing pathogens and destroying them. However, the third line of defense must first learn about these pathogens before they are able to destroy them, making them weak initially, but very strong after they've learned to recognize the pathogens. All of these different lines of defense work together to combat disease. Now, host mechanisms to defend the body against pathogens include molecules, tiny particles that you can't see with the microscope, cells, or a single living organism that works with the body that you can see with a light microscope, and organs, something that you can see with the naked eye. We're going to go over molecules, cells, and organs of the immune system in that order. The first thing that we're going to talk about is the molecule known as histamine. Histamine is produced by white blood cells called basophils. These are used to stimulate the inflammatory response, which is again the kind of response you get if you get a cut or a puncture wound in your skin. Histamine allows for your blood vessels to open up in order to allow for white blood cells to flood to the site of injury and prevent infections. Interestingly, histamine works in the brain as well to regulate sleep by making you feel more awake. This is why antihistamines that you may take for allergies can make you feel sleepy. They counter the action of histamine, which normally makes you feel awake. Basophils are stimulated to produce histamines not only for cuts or injury, but also in the case of allergies like pollen or dust. What makes allergies different from an immune response is that allergies are targeted to something that is not pathogenic or not harmful to the body, like pollen or dust. And this results in an immune response that is unnecessary by the body. The second molecule that I want to talk about is that molecule we referred to before as lysozyme. Lysozyme is another protein of the host defense mechanism and is an enzyme found in tears, saliva, breast milk, and other bodily fluids. It breaks down the cell wall of bacteria, causing the bacteria to explode like you see in this picture here. Since our cells have no cell walls, it does not affect our own cells and only affects bacteria and not viruses or fungi or other cells. A third molecule of the immune system is the antibody. Antibodies are also proteins. These are made by the adaptive or acquired immune response to specifically recognize pathogens. The antibody is made by your own body to recognize molecules from pathogens known as antigens. Antigens are then considered to be foreign and are targeted for destruction. Antibodies made by the body are made specifically by B cells of the body, and these are released into the blood to float freely. As you can see by the structure, antibodies have a Y-shaped structure with the ability to bind to two antigens at once. The antigen-antibody binding is very specific. So there are antibodies that are specific to this year's flu virus that will not be effective against next year's flu virus, even if they're very similar. If an antibody does find an antigen and bind to it, it targets that antigen and whatever it's attached to for destruction. The antibody is able to do this by signaling to white blood cells of the immune system to attack the antigen and its associated cells. This confers a strong and long-lasting immune response against that antigen and its associated pathogen. Next, let's talk about the molecules known as the major histocompatibility complexes, or MHCs. There are 3 classes of MHCs, but we're going to go over only 2 of them in this lecture. The first one, MHC class 1 cell surface receptors, are molecules located in the cell membrane of all cells in the human body with a nucleus. Most of the protein is found on the outside of the cell. This MHC class I cell surface protein helps our immune system identify which cells belong to our body and which ones do not. Every individual on Earth has a different MHC class I cell surface receptor. And the way your immune system recognizes if a cell belongs in your body or not is it looks for the MHC class I cell surface receptor specific to you. If the cell does not have your specific MHC class I cell surface receptor, those cells will be targeted for destruction. That is why these molecules are the basis for organ transplantation rejection. Because if someone else were to give you an organ, that organ would have cells with a different person's MHC class I cell surface receptors on the outside, making your immune system recognize it as foreign and target it for destruction. MHC class I cell surface receptors are similar between relatives and of people of similar ethnicities, and the more distant the relationship, the different they are. These cell surface receptors, as I mentioned, are found on all nucleated cells in the body. The only cells that do not have a nucleus are red blood cells. They are born with nuclei, but the red blood cells eventually lose their nucleus in circulation. This is why red blood cells can be donated from person to person without rejection, as long as they have the right blood type. Then we have MHC class II cell surface receptors. MHC class II cell surface receptors are molecules that are again found in the cell membrane, but these are only found in the cell membrane of some types of white blood cells. Those white blood cells use these MHC class II cell surface receptors to bind to free-floating antigens and help B cells make antibodies to target them. This is one way that your innate defense mechanisms work together with your acquired immune system. In our next section, we're going to go over cells of the immune system and then organs of the immune system.